Mumbai's skyline is a beacon of wealth. Millions of people live stacked in these glittering towers, separated only by concrete walls. But behind those closed doors, in some of the most affluent neighborhoods, horrific abuses can go completely unnoticed. This reality crashed into the home of actress Sambhavna Seth 2 days ago. Out of nowhere, her live-in house help, Gudia, broke down in tears. When asked what was wrong, Gudia explained that her older sister, Neha, had just taken a domestic job in a Kargar high-rise. According to a desperate phone call, Neha was now in severe danger, begging for her life. This was the start of a hostage situation disguised as a domestic job. Within days of arriving, Neha's basic right to move or communicate was being stripped away under the cover of a standard employment contract. Domestic agencies typically operate on a trial basis. Clients test out workers for a few days, and a broker fee is paid once both parties provide mutual consent. This trial period ensures the safety and satisfaction of both the employer and the worker. Neha's trial was a nightmare. She was immediately tasked with caring for 5 large dogs and 13 cats, many kept in tight cages. Within days, her employers piled on cooking, deep cleaning, and heavy lifting. Neha had recently undergone a C-section and physically could not handle the intense labor. When she tried to bring up these issues, she had a wall of intimidation. Her female employer claimed to be a practicing advocate at the Bombay High Court, using that title to assert total authority. Neha formally asked to leave, requesting the employer hold the agency fee. The employer agreed, then reversed course the next day, claiming she had already paid the agency and that Neha was forbidden to leave. They confiscated her Aadhaar ID, hid all her clothes, and restricted her phone access. The employers deadbolted the main door. They took Neha to the balcony, pointing out the desolate areas far below, and told her that if she tried to run, they would chop her into pieces and throw her off. 30 floors above the street, this modern apartment became a prison. The employers stripped a vulnerable worker of her identity, cut off her escape routes, and weaponized isolation to keep her in compliance. Sambhavna eventually got the employer on the phone. The moment she introduced herself as a known television personality, the employer's tone completely flipped. The aggressive intimidation vanished, replaced by extreme politeness and claims of being a huge fan. Looking for a peaceful exit, Sambhavna's husband offered a direct financial compromise. He promised to personally reimburse the disputed 30,000 rupee agency fee within 24 hours, guaranteeing the employer would lose nothing, provided they just let Neha walk out the door. The employer agreed on the call, but the second they hung up, the diplomatic facade dropped. They continued to starve Neha, who had barely eaten in 2 days, and resumed shouting violent obscenities at her. An initial physical rescue failed entirely. Workers from the domestic agency arrived at the building, but because the employers explicitly instructed the ground floor security to deny them entry, the guards blocked them at the gate. The abusers used their class privilege to manipulate the situation perfectly. They weaponized the building's security protocols to block physical access, while maintaining a polite, agreeable mask on phone calls to delay any outside intervention. The rescue stalled until an unexpected neighbor stepped in. A woman working with an NGO who lived on the 24th floor of the same building caught wind of the situation. Already inside the security perimeter, she headed straight up.
She reached the 30th floor and rang the bell. When the employer cracked the heavy door to see who it was, the NGO worker shoved her entire arm through the opening, physically blocking them from shutting it again. She pushed her way inside. Absolute chaos erupted. The employer started shouting and getting physical. On an open phone line, Sambhavna and Gudia were screaming for Neha to use the distraction and run. Spotting a tiny gap under the NGO worker's arm, Neha sprinted for the exit. The employer's husband thrust his leg out to trip her, injuring her leg on the way out, but her momentum carried her past him. She hit the stairwell. Terrified they would catch her, Neha sprinted down 30 flights of concrete stairs. The employers immediately jumped into the elevator, racing down to intercept her at the ground floor. Knowing the captors would be waiting at the bottom, the NGO worker pulled off a split-second tactical maneuver. She grabbed Neha and the agency workers, pulling them into a neighbor's balcony on a lower floor to hide, while the employers scoured the ground level. They eventually slipped out a side gate. The official protocols designed to protect citizens played no part in this rescue. Neha escaped solely due to sheer physical desperation and the split-second courage of a neighbor who refused to back down. Where was law enforcement during all of this?
Earlier that evening, the agency workers had begged the Kargar police station for help. The officers refused to send a rescue team, claiming procedural rules prevented them from detaining a woman after sunset, even though the immediate goal was simply to extract a hostage. Secure in the knowledge that local police wouldn't intervene, the captors grew incredibly brazen. After Neha escaped, the female employer called the rescuers back. On a recorded phone line, she explicitly threatened to murder them if they returned. By midnight, Neha finally reached Sambhavna's home. She was in a severe state of trauma, shivering uncontrollably, starved, and dealing with a heavily swollen leg from her panicked escape down the stairs. But the system isn't entirely broken. Sambhavna took Neha to the Bangor Nagar police station. The senior officers there were appalled. They actually apologized for the Kargar precinct's inaction, and then stayed awake until 8 a.m. taking statements and officially registering the first information report. The difference between these two precincts was the difference between Neha remaining in a dangerous environment and receiving legal protection. When local authorities refuse to act on a clear rescue request, it emboldens captors who believe the law won't reach past their front door. This happened in a luxury tower. The perpetrators spoke fluent English, wore heavy gold jewelry, and hid behind a prestigious job title. Criminals do not always fit a specific profile. They rely on the veneer of respectability to hide their actions in plain sight. That means the responsibility falls on the people living right next door. If you hear excessive screaming, strange noises, or notice constant distress coming from a neighboring apartment, you cannot afford to ignore it. The police cannot monitor every locked door in a massive urban skyline. Sometimes the most powerful tool against domestic abuse is just knocking on a door and asking if everything is okay. It forces the abusers to realize they are being watched. Neha survived because a neighbor, a public figure, and a group of young women refused to look away. When ordinary citizens actively look out for one another, their collective voice is powerful enough to break down the strongest doors.